And now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, David McCraw. You're in for a real treat. David McCraw is the Vice President and Deputy General Counsel for the New York Times. He is the newspaper's primary litigator. Mr. McCraw is responsible for providing legal counsel to the Times a newsroom on issues such as libel, freedom of information, access to the courts, and news gathering. Before joining the New York Times in 2002, he was the Deputy General Counsel for the New York Daily News and a litigation associate at Clifford Chance and the firm Rogers & Wells. Before that, he clerked for Judge Richard Simons at the New York Court of Appeals. Mr. McCraw is among the nation's most important and well-respected and talented media lawyers. His work puts him at the center. Every time we get to the good parts, we get a little splashing. His work puts him at the center of daily front page battles over a free press, open government, and fake news. Given what he does, we have to wonder what's happening. His work is a prime example of the impact an Albany law degree can make. As a strong advocate for the First Amendment and a dogged enforcer of the freedom of information laws, he was on the front lines of the first WikiLeaks episode. He's filed more than 20 lawsuits against the Obama administration regarding freedom of information requests, and he has engaged in high-profile legal conflicts with President Trump's lawyers. He drew particular attention all around the world when his letter that rejected a request to retract a story went viral. I know that a particular former Albany Law School lawyering professor took special delight in the strength of the legal writing in that letter and contacted Dave McCraw to essentially say, A+, job well done. Mr. McCraw is active in pro bono work in many parts of the world on issues of press freedom and freedom of information, and has been described as one of the best media lawyers in the country and a tireless defender of the First Amendment. He also plays a major role in the paper's security effort to oversee journalists, where he helps lead crisis response for kidnappings or when journalists are detained. His commitment to the rule of law is inspiring. As a member of our Board of Trustees, he's a model alumnus who gives generously of his time and energy to Albany Law School. He was our alumnus in residence in 2013, where he spent a day in the classroom with students and faculty sharing his experience and advice. We know from that day, and I remember personally from Mr. McCraw's valedictorian speech, that we're going to get a good speech today. So without any further ado, please join me in welcoming David McCraw, class of 1992.
Thank you. I remember her when she was a kid, and I lorded it over her at Law Review. And I hope that, although I've been told that the lights flicker when the dean tells a lie, so much for that introduction. Listen, I'm honored to be here. I think it's fair to say to you, the class of 2017, that this is a day of joy and wonder. Joy because you've done it. You have done what you set out to do 3 years ago. You've earned a law degree, and I mean you earned it. And wonder, because I can tell as you sit there that you are filled with wonder. And it's the same wonder that all your family members and friends, supporters out there are wondering too. And it's summed up in the sentence, I wonder how long this guy's going to talk for. Wonder no more. The answer is 12 minutes. Just one word of advice to the graduates. If I happen to go over my 12 minutes and you find yourself sitting there thinking, hey, I could sue this guy for breach of contract, know that I admire your spirit, but please promise me that you will take a really, really good bar review course. 25 years ago, I stood on this stage addressing my graduating class. 3 years earlier, I had arrived at law school as a 34-year-old college professor on a one-year leave from my job with no clear vision of what I was doing. I drove every day the first year from Ulster County, 60 miles each way, with my infant son strapped to his car seat, the two of us on our own personal missions, I going to law school, he on his way to daycare. We had our rituals. Almost every day when we hit the Albany city limits, I would crank up the sound system to play our two theme songs really, really loud. One of the truly great things about having a baby ride shotgun with you in a car is he cannot tell you that your choice in music sucks. That, I can assure you, does not last. We always played the Neville Brothers first, a song called If Something Is Wrong With My Baby, Something Is Wrong With Me. That one was obvious, and oh, was it true. But the second one was the song that sort of captured our whole experience, the chaos of juggling daycare and law school and commuting and studying and the baby upcheck and the emergency diaper changes. It was a Jackson Browne song called Anything Can Happen. Of course, I didn't need Jackson Browne to tell me that anything can happen. I was in law school. I took law school exams. A law school exam is a monument to the idea that anything can happen. Sadistic professors spend their entire semester thinking up strange and demented hypotheticals. You know what I'm talking about. Asteroids hit a bank, starting a fire that destroys the last will and testament of Mr. A, while also blowing the pens out of the hand of Mr. B and Mr. C, who were just about to sign a contract, while nearby Mr. D, the intended third-party beneficiary of said contract and the duly designated executor of the will and testament, was blown into the air and landed in another jurisdiction right on top of a fox that had just been shot simultaneously by two hunters. Discuss! Standing on this stage 25 years ago, I spared my classmates a discussion of Jackson Browne lyrics and the musical tastes of infants. Instead, I talked about what I called the life-altering lessons that we would take away from Albany Law School. Of course, I had no idea what I was talking about. What did I know about practicing law? But here is the amazing thing, graduates. I actually got it right. Anything can happen. Here's what I said that day. Law is not merely abstract principles floating disembodied somewhere above the Earth's surface. It is instead about taking those principles and applying them in a pragmatic and meaningful way in the lives of real people in need. If being a graduate of Albany Law School means anything, it means being the kind of lawyer people count on. In 25 years since then, and I'm telling you, it is a world where anything can happen, I have always prided myself on being that kind of lawyer, an Albany lawyer, a lawyer who shows up, who keeps trying, who wakes up the next morning trying to figure out why whatever he did yesterday didn't work and what he can do today to make it happen. That was something I learned at Albany Law School. I hope you learned it too. One of my jobs at the Times, as the dean said, is to be the crisis response manager, to be the guy in charge of getting our people back when they go missing or get kidnapped or detained overseas. It's one of those jobs that tests you as a lawyer and tests you as a person. That was certainly true in 2011 when 4 of our journalists disappeared in Libya while covering the Civil War. We had no idea what had happened to them. The one thing we knew that day, though, was that they had been carrying a satellite phone, and we knew that for long as that phone was on, it would have been transmitting their geographical location, the longitude and latitude of where they were. There was just one problem. The sat phone company wouldn't give us the data from the phone. We asked, they refused. The company was headquartered in the Middle East, and finally, I got a senior executive to come to the phone. I explained that we needed the geographical coordinates, the latitude and longitude, that it was a matter of life and death. He said it was illegal for him to give it to us. We argued about the law. We argued over who owned the data. We argued about privacy. He wouldn't budge. Around and around we went. I was exasperated. And then he said something. "Oh, Mr. David," he said, "I hear what you were saying. You know, sometimes your head speaks and sometimes your heart speaks. And my head, it is saying, Mr. David, I cannot legally give you this information. I'm so sorry." And then there was a pause, and he said, "But Mr. David, you know, my heart is saying something else. It is saying that you should type into Google right now 31.897 north at 165702 east. I couldn't believe it. I was stunned. The guy had given me the coordinates. I hung up the phone. I turned to my computer. I madly typed the numbers in. Some obscure location in the middle of Poland popped up. I was pretty sure that the Gaddafi government had not taken our people to Poland. I was also pretty sure I had written them down wrong. So I took a deep breath. I dialed back and I said, Mr. Atta, could you go back to the part, you know, the part where your heart is talking? Our people were ultimately released, and I worked hard to make that happen. But to me, that phone call speaks to how my life as a lawyer unfolds. You are asked to do things you were never prepared to do. You stumble forward, you persist, you do the best you can, you make mistakes, and you always have the courage to call back. As some of you recall, and as the dean mentioned, I wrote a letter last October to Donald Trump's lawyer defending the right of the New York Times to tell the story of two women who said they'd been groped by Mr. Trump years earlier. It was a particularly interesting experience for me. The Times decided to post the letter online. I was fine with that. I've spent my professional career fighting for greater transparency and openness. I sued the Obama administration 31 times because I thought officials were keeping secret documents that should be public. I believe in transparency. I believe in openness. But let me tell you something. You don't know anything about transparency and openness until your employer posts your phone number and your email address on the internet. Yes, that information was in the letterhead. My inbox exploded instantaneously. My phone began ringing. I was teaching at NYU Law School that semester, and one of my law students wanted to know, so how does that work? Did you get permission to send a letter? That would be a letter that said, please sue us. Make my day. I have a glass office, and about 10 minutes after that letter was posted online, I found out one of the not-so-great things about having a glass office is you can see when the CEO of your company is walking towards your office with a certain look on his face and a certain letter in his hand. In that instance, you begin to wonder whether it was such a super hot idea to send a bring-it-on letter to the next president of the United States without first checking with senior management. Our CEO, Mark Thompson, is an Englishman. He walked right in and cut to the chase. He held the letter up in front of me. Brilliant letter, he said, but there's one thing I'll never understand. Why do you Americans insist on capitalizing after a colon? That could have gone much worse, friends. And you can be sure there's not one capitalization in this speech. I learn. The response to the letter was incredible. I'm told 2 million people read the letter online. Law professors wrote to tell me they were teaching it in their class. Famous writers praised my writing. Famous lawyers praised my legal ability. 3 women proposed to me on Twitter. 2 literary agents approached me about writing a book. A Greenwich Village artist asked me to be in his art exhibit. A couple of weeks ago, a woman in Florida wrote to me to ask if she could have a copy of the letter because she wanted to post it in her car window. I hope she has glass coverage, okay? I won't lie to you. It's nice to have your work recognized, to be praised. And it's nice to have people believe in you. In fact, that's essential if you want to be a lawyer. But you know what's even nicer? Knowing how to believe in yourself. Because here's the thing about your moments of success. They are a lot like your mind-blowing screw-ups. They pass. They pass. And the next morning, you still have to get up and figure how to be a lawyer people can count on. In the aftermath of the Trump letter, I was asked often how I became a First Amendment lawyer at the New York Times. I actually had my first job in-house as a lawyer at the New York Daily News. That's where I got my start. Here's how it happened. It's a good story for a graduation day like this one. In 2000, I learned that the newsroom lawyer at the Daily News was leaving for CNN. I was working at a law firm, and I was really interested in trying to get the job. I'd been a journalist, and I'd been a journalism professor. I cared deeply about free speech issues. I called the headhunter handling the search. We had a great conversation. I liked her. She liked me. Then she said there was nothing she could do for me. Albany was not on the list of law schools that the Daily News legal department was interested in considering. That was a letdown. Of course, it bothered me. And I could have sat around and been disappointed and spent a few days thinking about how unfair life was. That was one option. Or I could have done exactly what I did do. Figure out how to get to the general counsel at Daily News, make my case directly to him, and get the job. That is what I did. And you know what that is, my fellow graduates? A total Albany move. In rereading my speech from 25 years ago, there was something else I got right. I ended the speech by thanking my professors, my family, and my classmates. You have spent these last 3 years learning to think with your head, as my friend at the phone company would say, but today, spend a little time thinking with your heart. You stood on someone else's shoulders. You took someone else's hand when you needed it most, and you sure as hell borrowed somebody's course outline along the way. Thank them all, and then go back to the serious business at hand today, feeling triumphant. Not just anything happened, something very specific and very special happened. You made it. Welcome to my world. I'm glad to have you.